everybody to week 9 of our Webflow workshop series. This week, we're going to be talking about advanced Webflow animations. So, if we have time, we'll try and go through page scroll animations, hide, show and hide interactions, scroll based animations. But we'll try and cover as much as possible in this hour, and then anything we don't cover, there is a video for online if you look at like the Webflow University lessons. So just keep that in mind. It's hard to cover everything in this 1 hour, but you can still learn through other resources. So last time we used this page to go over some simple hover animations, button animations, and I think even click animations we might have done. It's either click or scroll into view animations. So yes, we did scroll into view where, for example, if you scroll in a section and we want this button to appear as it did, how do we do that? We did hover animations, like if I hover over this, how can this change? And also the button change. So we did the basics in terms of animations. Before I move on to the animations though, Doreen, I know you shared your, maybe you didn't. Yeah, you did. Okay, you shared your assignment. So as always, if you guys share anything that you're working on, I can review it on the call and then give feedback or just comment on anything. So we'll start with this and then move forward with our lesson. So this is the sample site that Doreen was recreating in Webflow. I don't know if you also did the animations. What animations does this have? Okay, it has a scroll in animation, some fade in animations. Cool. So simple stuff. And then this is the build that you have. So this is on preview mode. So we're previewing how the site is already set up. So in scroll, we can see that we have this cool animation with the heading where it goes left and the bottom one goes right. So that's a cool animation. And then we have, this is the recreation of the page itself. I noticed that this did fade in as we scrolled, which is also really good. And then you scroll down and that's it. But I think this is really good work. I really like this animation with the headings and also that it fades, the color fades. I think that's a cool interaction. So I think this is really good work. I like that you incorporated also like a fade in animation with some sections. This is great. Like this is honestly really good. The only comment I have is just you'll notice that after you scroll and the heading goes off, it increases the width of the screen. So when I'm scrolling now, there's like this blank gap here. So in order to avoid that, you can just select the section that has whatever is making the window scroll overboard. Like for example, the hero section, and then you can set overflow to 0 or to hidden, sorry. So when you do that, if we preview, now even as we scroll, we see that we don't get that weird white space because we've overflow hidden. I don't know if I've actually covered it. Just basically means if the content overflows, oh gosh, is my screen stuck? If the content overflows its container, it will hide that content. So we can see here this text is overflowing its container, it's going off screen, but because we set overflow to hidden, it won't show the part that is going off screen. It'll only show anything that is maintained within the container. So whenever you have content that is going outside of its container because of its size or anything, and you don't want that weird white thing to appear, just set overflow hidden to the section and it should solve it. I think we covered this last lesson or maybe earlier, but just keep in mind when you do set anything to overflow hidden and you have a sticky animation or sticky styling within, for example, this section, sticky will not work if any of its parent elements are set to overflow hidden. So that's also just something to keep in mind. But otherwise, this is great. I don't even have any further comments. This is really good use of animation. Excited to see what you do next. I don't know if you had any questions, Doreen, specifically.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you
Mm-hmm.
scroll down?
Yeah.
Scroll down. Yes, this one. This section of select works.
Mm-hmm.
In the original section, this, yes, you see there's overflow here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like. I couldn't recreate this in my in my in my work. How can you achieve that?
I think the best thing to do is to set the text as absolute. So if we wrap this text in its own div, for example, and we can just say work heading, and then you can set its position as absolute. You want to make sure that the parent, so absolute will go according to a parent layer. We don't want it to be body because body is this full page. So for example, if I set this to be top left, you can see it disappears because it's top left of the body, which is the whole page. We don't want it. We want it to be top left of, I think this container is fine. So we're going to select that parent layer and we're going to set that to relative. Now that we've set it to relative, this work heading container will only go top right of this layer. So once it's top right, or think it doesn't matter top right, bottom right. You can then start playing around with positioning. So you can use percentage if you want it to move as the user scrolls, or you can use fixed numbers if you don't want it to move as the user scrolls. So like, let's say this is, we can move this down to like 11 rem. Now you'll notice that this bottom section has now come up because now that we've set this heading to absolute, it means that it's not taking up space on the page anymore. So the section below it is going to obviously move upwards. How you can counteract that is you can select your work position wrapper, this layer, and just give it more margin or more padding to make up for this space. So you could say this is, I don't know, nrem or 14 RAM, however much it's supposed to be. And so you can do that. So when you do that, it increases the, I think I did padding, increases the padding. So it is creating more space, which is then pushing everything else down. So then you don't get the bottom section overlapping with the top section. And then now when you preview, it looks how it's supposed to. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. Another
Okay, great.
question, as I was
Mm-hmm,
doing this, yes, scroll up
mm-hmm,
the arrow section. Yes,
mm-hmm,
as I was doing the animation, this of portfolio, the one which goes right and left.
mm-hmm,
Remember, I used the same class for both headings. Now,
mm-hmm,
the issue came when I was doing like the animation. There was a
mm-hmm,
place I was supposed to check, to choose classes, I don't know, parents, stuff like that.
mm-hmm,
Now, if I do that, like all the properties apply, they act on the same thing. For instance, I wanted the upper one to go on the left, and then
mm-hmm,
on the down one to go on the right. But because they
mm-hmm,
had the same class, like
mm-hmm,
if I apply for the top one to go left, all of them they went left.
mm-hmm.
So what I did, I used different namings. Now I'm
Yeah.
asking, is that okay?
Yeah, in this case, that's fine to use different namings. If, like, for example, if the only difference between this and this, other than the animation, is maybe the color, you can also just use combo classes. Because combo classes later on, if you make changes, like let's say you need to increase or change the color of this. Right now, if you change it, you change this to, let's say, gray, and then you also have to go click this one and change it to gray because they're completely different classes. So they're independent of each other. You have to change them separately. But if they had the same main class, like let's say heading 3, and this is position top, you could have also made this heading 3 position bottom. And then even when you're targeting, so if we go back to interactions, for example, if you select class, you can choose which subclass it targets. So it doesn't have to target all the H3 headings. You can say this is okay, this is targeting position bottom. And then this one is going to be targeting position top. So now when you preview, it should still work. They have the same main class, but the combo classes are different. The reason why I would recommend using combo classes is because later on, let's say if you want to change like the color, like I said, for example, and I change this, it'll change it for both of them. So you don't have to go and change this one, this one. So in this case, you only have two, so it doesn't really matter. It's not a lot of work. But if you had many instances of the same class, using a combo class is better because you'll still have the main class that you can go and manipulate later on if you need to make changes. But giving them unique classes is also fine. Like in this case, it's just two headings, so it's not a bad idea to just give them their own unique class. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, no worries. Really great work. This is awesome. I love the animations. Um, and yeah, this is honestly really good. And you even went beyond with doing the, I don't know if we did this last time. So that's a great starting point. We can go back. I wonder if I have an example here I can use. So, going back to our Luma, we are continuing with animations. We have page scroll, da da da. I think I'm going to click this interaction field and see which animations we haven't covered. So we did cover tap and we covered hover. Mouse move over element. We didn't cover scroll into view. We did last time. And while scrolling in view, we also didn't cover. So mouse move over element is similar to hover. And while scrolling in view is kind of similar to scroll into view. So we can start with mouse move over element. You can see it gives you this description. Animate while cursor moves over the element along the X or the Y axis. So basically this is saying when your mouse is moving over whatever element you've selected, something in particular should happen. So very similar to mouse hover, but the cases in which you'd use mouse move over element is if for example, I'm trying to think what's a good example in which I would use this. Um, so for example, if you click this mouse hover, you can see has a very different way in which the animation is set up. Like you click open to an animation or create a new animation, and then this is how the animation field is set up. Where in contrast, mouse move over element, if you click to add a new animation to this, you'll see that the setup is very different because it's asking you, okay, what X and Y actions do you, as the mouse is moving over the X axis and as the mouse is moving over the Y axis, what interactions do you want to happen? I'm trying to think, what could I do? Let's say, for example, I have a circle. I'll make this circle absolute. Let me make it fix. Absolute. I'll give it like a bright red color. And I'll put it in its own wrapper as well, actually. Okay. So this is our circle. So if we selected, for example, this circle wrapper and we clicked mouse move out. So while we are moving our mouse over this circle wrapper, this is what we want to happen. So we can turn on mouse animation. On preview right now, you can see nothing happens. Like it's just as it is. But let's say we wanted this dot to move around the container with our mouse at the same time. That's an example of when you would use mouse move over element because it's an animation where you're saying, okay, while my mouse is moving over this section, I want something to happen that is following my mouse almost in a way. So we selected our circle wrapper, that's the trigger, and then we're gonna select circle and we're gonna say on the x-axis, which is left and right, we want it to move. We're setting essentially the space we want it to move around. So we can say minus And as you input values, you can also see what they say. So let's say we wanted to move it minus 50 VW and then also 50 VW. So this is just setting this from left to right, this whole section is how much we want it to move. So it can go all the way to the left and it can go all the way to the right. If you put smaller values here, like for example, you only wanted it to move within this small area here, it would only move up to here or up to here. So that's why we're setting these values. And we're using VW because it'll adjust according to the user's um, screen width. Remember, we covered the different why we would use VW and VH. Same thing with y-axis, which is up and down. We'll set a move animation and we'll say we want it to go from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen. Okay. There's also a live preview button here, so you can actually, before you even save or anything, preview how the animation will work. So we can automatically see that as we're moving our mouse, our circle is moving with us. And you can see these green tags here indicate the distance it's moving according to the animation. So this is, remember, this is the starting point for the x-axis, and this is the starting point for the y-axis, and then this is the ending point for the x and y-axis. So we are taking this full container. So the circle will follow wherever we go in this full container. Let's say we adjusted this, we only wanted to move in like a small area, like just 10, so total like 20 rem of area. And then we can also set our height to be that. Now if we preview, light preview was off. Now if you preview, we can see it's still moving, but now it can only move up to a certain point, like because we have minimized the distance in which this can move in. So even if we go all the way here, it's still following our mouse, but it cannot fully extend to where we want it to go because we have limited the distance that it's moving in. Okay, so let me just do that. Okay, now I did move animations, but you can do other animations. I mean, you can do essentially any animation you want. You can do scale, rotate, skew. You can do any styling animations. I haven't done mouse move animation with styling animations that much, but same process applies. As your mouse is moving over whatever you've set as the trigger for your animation, you can then apply certain styling attributes to whatever you want. Like, I mean, let's do one as an example. Like, let's say as our mouse is moving over this section, we want to change the color of this text to go from, a certain color to a different color. I have never done this before, so we shall see how it works. So the starting color is going to be this green. And so this is the starting point, which is 0% when we are all the way here. Let me just close this here. And then as we go to the right, we want the text color to go to, let's say, blue. Okay, so we're gonna do a nice blue. Now, if we preview, let's see how it works. So you can see now as we are on the left side, if you look at your tag here, the text is more green. And then as you gradually move to the right side, your text is more blue. You can then also combine that with like up and down animations too. Some really cool effects by doing something like this. So this is mouse move over animation. If I just save that. Another thing I want to clarify with this animation is you can see here there's an animation resting state. What is this? If you click the question mark, it'll tell you. But if you just look at your dot, this is the resting state for this particular, rather, right now it's at 50%, which means even right now we've positioned our dot in the middle in styling. But if we didn't position it in the middle and we just positioned it anywhere else, it would start in the middle because we have set the resting state for animation to be 50% on the x-axis, which is right here, and 50% on the y-axis, which is in the middle. So our animation will always start from the center. For example, if I move my mouse off screen, like here, oh, I can't really do it here because the screen isn't big enough. But if you moved your mouse on screen, essentially the dot would go back to where it needs to go. And then as soon, which is this resting point here. And then as soon as you move your mouse back on screen, the dot would follow you again. So this is just setting like when your animation is not active, what is the resting state? So you could set this to 0, 0 if you wanted it to start from up here or anywhere on the screen. I normally just leave it as 50%, 50% because that works. And then the second thing you want to know is smoothing, which basically smoothens the animation, to put it simply. So right now when you preview, we can see that our dot follows our mouse and it's like pretty, like it's right on our mouse. Like there's no if you move your mouse a lot, it can feel like maybe there's some deviation and our circle is lagging around a lot. But for the most part, the dot is exactly where the mouse is. Let's say you wanted more of a subtle animation, like the dot is lagging a bit behind the mouse. You would do that by increasing the smoothing. So the more you increase the smoothing, the smoother the animation is. So it's almost like there's a delay in the animation and it's more gradual. So now if we preview, we can see that there is a delay with our dot. It's not instantly moving to follow the mouse, but there's a slight delay because we have increased the smoothing. If you decrease the smoothing, um, in this case, it doesn't really make a difference because of the animation that we've created, but it would just make the animation more abrupt. So depending on what effect you want, you can either increase or decrease your smoothing. So this is mouse move over animation. It's a really good one. A lot of people use this for like custom cursors. Like I think on my website, not opened my website in forever. Yeah, so on my website, I have this custom cursor that I'm using, and I set that up using mouse move over animation. Obviously, I have two elements here. I have this small dot and this circle. So you can see the dot follows my mouse faster than the circle, and that just means that the circle, the large circle, I added a greater smoothing effect, and the smaller circle, I decrease the smoothing effect. So it creates this cool, nice delay. Okay. So this is mouse move or animation. The second kind of animation that we didn't cover last time is while scrolling in view. So this is animation that you can use. A lot of time people use this for parallax animations because it's just animating elements as you're scrolling through your screen or your window. So I'm wondering, okay, we could probably do it for this section. So if I select this entire footer section here and I click while scrolling in view, oh, I actually don't know how this will work. Let me actually give this parent layer because right now it's just one section, so there's not much that we're scrolling through, but I want to show you guys how the scrolling effect would work. So I'm gonna make it fixed. I essentially gave it a parent layer and I made it 200 VH and my section is 100 VH. So there is a scrolling effect. It's hard to see now because let me actually give it, can I give it padding so you can actually. Okay. Well, essentially, I gave the parent layer 200 VH because I wanted to double. This section is 100 VH. Essentially, think of like two sections stacked on top of each other. I wanted to create more space so we can actually have a scroll animation to work with. So now if I go interactions and I click I'll delete that and I'll click our parent layer while scrolling in view and give it the while scrolling in view animation. So you can see it has animation boundaries, which we can cover in a bit, but here's where we would add our animation. Notice also there's smoothing for this as well, so you can adjust the smoothing. So we're gonna create a new animation. And let's say what we want is we want our, actually very similar to how Doreen did her animation, her website. We want something to move as we're scrolling up and down this section. What do we want to move? Let's say we want to move this brand name. So we want it to start from a bit lower from where it actually is right now. So let's say we want it to start from 13 rem, and then we want it to go to 0 rem. So this basically means at the start, when we are at the top of this section, this footer name will be slightly off screen. So 0 rem, 13 rem, we moved it down a bit. And then once we get to the bottom of this main layer, it'll move up to 0 rem. 0 rem is essentially the default position we already have set it in. So we can also live preview this. So you can see as we scroll, the heading goes up and down. Sometimes live preview doesn't look as good as you might want it to, which is fine. You can just turn that off and then actually preview it on your site. So now we can see as we're scrolling up and down, our heading is also moving up and down. Same thing as always, if you wanted to increase the smoothing and make this more gradual in how it moves as opposed to instant, you can also do that. So now you can see there's a bit more of a subtleness to the animation. It's not so instant. So that's while scrolling in section. You can use this for parallax animations, or essentially anytime you want to animate a section and have elements move or animate in interesting ways as you are scrolling through the section, this is the type of animation that you can use. Any questions up until this point before I move on to page? Actually, before page triggers, we'll do something else. So before page triggers, let's quickly cover the show hide interactions for dropdowns and modals. I think we covered this before. I hope. Okay, we'll use this as an example. We covered this before where I said when you click here, element trigger, there are these 5 animations that you can use for anything. And then there are 4 here that are hidden unless you're using a specific element. So one is specific to the nav bar, one is specific to a drop down, one is specific to a tab change, and then one is specific to a slider change. I won't go over all of these. I think we'll do between nav bar and drop down. I think which one is better to do. Let's do a drop down opens. Honestly, these are pretty similar in how they work. So we'll do drop down opens. So in order to actually use this animation, you have to add a drop down to your site. So if you just look for drop down here, we can see we have our drop down element. And then we can, I mean, we don't need to style it, but I'm gonna set this to 0 and 0 because I want it to be right below. And then I can also give this like a color to make it more distinguishable. And then you can see now there is no drop down. We have actually covered drop down lesson, drop down elements in our classes. But how you can view your drop down and then edit it is by going into settings. And then here under drop down settings, you can click show and then it'll actually show your drop down. So we can see here that this is our drop down list. If I open my layers panel, I can see it there too. And then here you can add in all sorts of styling that you want. Also, it comes with drop down links by default, but you can always remove these and add essentially whatever links that you can add in anything. You don't have to just add in text links. You can add in anything you want, or you can use the same drop down links that they have. And then this is also, so just to go over the hierarchy, you have your main drop down layer, and then you have a toggle. This is basically what, when the user clicks, this will activate the drop down, and it comes by default with text and an icon. But like I said, you can add anything to this. So you can actually use drop downs in a lot of situations because they don't have to look like this. And then you have your drop down list. Now to activate our animation, let's say we want, so right now, if we close our menu and we preview, when we click, you can see that the list appears and disappears. It's like instant, which is fine, but like it's not fun. So let's say we want to have our lists sort of extend more gradually. So we can use sizing, we can use movement, we can play around, but the main premise is that we're adding an animation to it. So with our drop down selected, we're gonna go into interactions, and then now you'll see that a drop down opens is activated. So we're gonna select drop down opens, and you'll see there are 2 options here for animations. You animate what happens when the menu is opened and also when the menu is closed. So we'll go to start an animation and we'll create a new animation. And like I mentioned, we want our list to gradually expand as opposed to just instantly appearing. So let's say we can try size first and we can see how that works. So by default, right, we want the initial state of our list to have a height of 0, basically to have no height. And then when it's open, we want our list to have a height of auto. So basically it just goes to the full height that it has. Now we can preview this and see how that looks. So we can see it is working as how we want it. It's going from 0 to auto, but our text is automatically appearing because we haven't set overflow to hidden. So essentially all the content in the links will still appear even if the actual list itself um, is narrowed down. So how we can fix that is just by setting this to overflow hidden. We'll go back to our toggle and just make sure that we're selecting the class. And then now if we preview, we can see that as it extends, the links appear. Now you'll notice that when I click it again to close it, it instantly disappears. And that's because we haven't set the animation for when the drop down should close. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the easing because I felt like it was a bit, boring. And you can play around with easing. There's so many different options. You can even do custom easing. But it's good to just play around and see which one works for you. So I'm gonna save this and I'm gonna open my menu close animation. And I'm just gonna duplicate this because we're using the same elements. I'm gonna delete this. And essentially what I want is to go from height 0 to 10. Notice that we don't have an initial state here because this is the second animation. We already set our initial state here. So essentially, this is the first animation. It goes from 0 to auto. And then when it's in the state of auto, the initial state is already set by that first animation. So you don't need to then set it again when you're closing it. So now if we preview, we can see it's open. And you can see now it's still automatically closing. And that's because something I actually completely forgot about. When you go into settings, you can see here there's this option for close delay, which basically states how much of a delay you want before the menu closes. By close, it just means like it disappears automatically. Right now it's 0, which basically means when the menu is closed, it automatically disappears. But now that we've added animation, we actually want to see our animation before the menu closes. So we want to increase this close delay so we can see the animation and then the menu closes. So first, let's go into our interactions and see how long is our closing animation. So you can see here it's 0.5 ms. So this is how long our animation is, or 0.5 seconds rather. So when you go here, don't put 0.5 ms. This is milliseconds. 0.5 seconds, which is the duration it showed in interactions, is the same as 500 milliseconds. You can always Google this conversion. You don't have to always do it in your head, but just keep that in mind. 1 second is 1000 milliseconds. So you have to do that conversion. So now we've set it to 500 milliseconds, which should mean that it shows our animation before it closes. And let's preview. So this is our open animation and our close animation. Open animation and our close animation. Now you'll notice there's this weird glitch with our close animation where it like extends before it turns off. And sometimes with Webflow, you have to really just play around with how different things work. So it could be a case of maybe instead of using RAM, we try to use pixels. There are just certain things that you unfortunately have no choice other than to play around with. So now that I changed it from rem to pixels, it works. Why? I couldn't tell you, but this is kind of just part sometimes in learning these new tools. There's certain glitches or certain things that you just pick up over time. And the good thing is, normally when you run into issues like these and you look online, people have run into the same issue before and they can give you that solution. I've run into this issue many times, hence why I knew that I had to change from REM to pixels to see if it would work. So now our dropdown has this nice gradual closing and opening animation, which is much better. You could even go in and say, okay, when it's open, we want this arrow to flip around. You can do all sorts of things, but the premise is I just wanted to showcase how these show and hide animation to work. So this same concept is the same for navbar. Navbar opens basically means the menu itself. So on mobile mode specifically, when that menu opens, what animation do you want to set? So same concept as this. It's just that you are now animating the menu. Tab change and slider change. Tab change, it even tells you when you hover it. This is when you select a tab element to use as a trigger. So when you have tabs in Webflow, as you are going from one tab to another, what animation do you want to add? You create your tabs, you add the animation, and it allows you to choose the animation when the tab is active, I think, going to the next tab. Same thing with slider. When the slider is changing to a new slide, you can set the animation. We won't cover these in this lesson, but you can always look up more information on them. But when you add the element to Webflow is when you'll be able to add in these different animations. So those are show hide animations. And then last but not least, we will cover page triggers, which are down here. So these are animations that are triggered according to the page's state. So it's not a specific element that triggers them, it's just the page state that triggers them. So when you click plus, you can see you have 4 options. You have mouse move in viewport, which is actually very similar to this, except the only difference is that this is mouse move over elements, which basically means an animation that's triggered as you're moving over a specific element. It could be this whole screen, it could be this image. So for example, that animation I did previously, I could have just used a page trigger because we were using the whole screen. I didn't have to use this one, but same concept. So, and then we have while page is scrolling, which is once again similar to while scrolling in view, except instead of focusing only on the section that you choose, this is taking into account the whole page. So from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, you can have certain things animate. Then there are page load animations, which are very similar to scroll into view animations. So on page load, what interactions do you want to happen? And then page scroll animation is animations that occur as you're scrolling up and down a page. So these are the four that we are working with. I want to do one that maybe I do page scrolls because there might be confusion between while page is scrolling and page scrolls. So let's see. Do I have an example here that I guess I could use this? And I can select page scrolls. So this one, as you can see, it's different in how you would set it compared to while page is scrolling. But while page is scrolling is you set the 0 to 100% according to the section. But if I click page scrolls, it gives me two options. I can animate what happens when I scroll up the page, and I can animate what happens when I scroll down the page. So it even gives you that description, define actions that occur when the page scrolls up versus when the page scrolls down. So these are good because sometimes you don't want a gradual animation that simply goes up and down. So for example, with the rain side, as you scroll up and down, this animation occurs. Doesn't matter how many times you do it, this animation will always happen. And it goes according to your mouse trigger. So the slower you move, the slower the animation. The faster you move, the faster the animation. But sometimes you might want animation that just happens. So when I scroll up the page, it happens. Or when I scroll down the page, it happens. But it doesn't, the speed doesn't change according to how fast or slow I'm scrolling. So if we use this as an example, um, and I might do the same thing here where I give it a parent layer. And I'll make that fixed. Okay, so now you can see as we scroll, our section is fixed, but it is scrolling. Um, Let me actually make some slight adjustments there. Okay, so let's say we want to do our page scroll animation. So as we are scrolling up the page, okay, when scrolled up, so when we are scrolling up the page, or rather, actually, let's start with down. When we are scrolling down the page, we want, what do we want to do? Okay, let's say we want to play around with the size of the text. So as we're scrolling down the page, we want that, actually, I don't know if you can do size of text with this. Okay, we can use scale. So as I'm scrolling down the page, I want the size of this text to reduce. And then as I'm scrolling up the page, I want it to increase. So let's add an action. We'll call it scale and we'll say 0.7. So we want it to get smaller. And we'll say the initial state for this is that obviously it's going to start at 1. That's the initial state. And then it will go to 0.7. You can see here we can also set um, if we preview, that's how it's going to work. So now if I preview, right, it happened instantly, but oh, actually, why did it happen instantly? Let's go ahead and, okay, because I've selected the same animation for scrolled up and also scrolled down. So I'm going to remove the scrolled up animation and start with scroll down. Now if we scroll down, we can see it shrinks. And the way in which that it shrinks is automatic. It doesn't happen according to how fast I scroll. It's an instant animation that is triggered. Now, if we go back to when it scrolls up, we'll duplicate this animation and we'll remove this and we'll say we want it to scale back to its original sizing, which is 1. So now if we preview, we're starting from the top. When we go down, it shrinks. When we go up, it increases, down, up. So the animation is instant. It doesn't go according to my essentially how I've set it. Whereas if I go back here, the animation is affected according to how much I am scrolling or how fast I am scrolling. So that's the difference between page scrolled, or even if you go to trigger, scroll into view is the one that is similar to page scrolled. We have our animation. When we scroll down, it happens in a certain way. Sorry, we scroll down, it happens in a certain way. And when we scroll up, it triggers as well. So that's the key difference between those two animations. Depending on what kind of effect you want, you can also play around with both and see which one is better for you. A lot of the time it's interchangeable. But like, for example, in this instance, I wanted this bouncy animation when my text is resizing. So in this case, I have to use page scrolled because it allows me to set that bouncy effect. Whereas if I was using an animation like this, oops, I wouldn't be able to do that because it's just scrolling gradually according to my mouse. So these are all our key animations. As mentioned before, mouse move and viewport and while page is scrolling are similar to the others. The only one that I think I haven't covered is page load, which I said is pretty similar to scroll into view, but it's an animation that you can set when the page starts or finishes loading. So actually, we can finish off with that. So let's say you want a loading animation. So actually, I think even Webflow has default. Oh, they don't. I thought they might have default loaders. So I have my loading animation. Let's say I want, so let me actually style the loader first. I'm gonna make it fixed. Um, and I'm gonna give it, I can make it yellow. And I'm gonna make it flex. And I'm gonna add another loader here, which is loader bar. So what I want is I want this bar, which will be, just make it black. And it can be 100%. And let's say 10 rem is a lot. Let's say 5 rem. I want this bar to go from 0% to 100% width as the page is loading. That's what we're gonna do. So if we select our loader here, and we're going to go into interactions, and we're going to add a page load animation. So we're going to add a new, so you can see there are two options here. You can set animation when the page starts loading and when the page finishes loading. So when the page starts loading, we are going to, first of all, our loader is actually going to be hidden initially. That's the initial state. Um, Actually, maybe it's supposed to be in view because it's a page load animation. I'll remove initial state for now, but we're going to set, oops, what we want is we want our bar to go from 0 to 100%. So we're going to set the size to 0% initially. And then at the end, when the page is done loading, we're going to set the size to 100%. Normally, you wouldn't really need to set a timer for this because it really should just depend on the page. But we can say, let's say this is a 5-second animation. So now if I preview, we can see that our bar is going from 0 to 100%. Now it's 100%, but our loader is still here. You know, it's supposed to disappear once it's done. So we'll select our loader again, and we'll select add an animation for the when the page finishes loading or when our animation is done. We'll duplicate what we had before, and we can actually just delete all this, and we want to set our loader to actually, instead of just hiding it, let's say we want it to move from where it is now, which is 0 VW, and we want it to move down off screen. So we can say 100 VH, not VW, VH. So we want it to go from top of the screen to bottom of the screen, like so. And we'll set our easings to outside. So now let's preview and see if that works as intended. So you can see it happens automatically because my page is literally already loaded. Like there's not much I'm loading on the page. So it's gonna happen instantaneously. If you wanted to um avoid that happening, you can go into your when you're essentially this animation for when page finishes loading, and you can give it a delay. So that way you ensure that the animation does play for a certain period of time. So if I do that, now you can see that even though my page is loaded, there's a bit of a delay before the next animation happens. So that's how you can set page load animations for your different pages. I think we'll stop here today. Um, I don't know, Doreen, if you have any questions, or if anyone else, if you guys have questions, you can always email me and send me a message. That's totally fine. Let me hide this. But we covered a lot to do with animations and interactions in Webflow, but we didn't even cover anything. There's so much more you can do. It's just up to you and exploring the different things that you can do in Webflow. I think for homework, if you have time, I said that try and animate. Well, I put hero section, but you can animate anything you want. You can look at inspo online, play around with different types of interactions, and see what kind of animations you can play around with. You don't have to do hover. You can do any of the ones we've covered in this lesson or that you learn on your own. And yeah, you can also share that work with me, and I can also give you feedback if needed. But otherwise, thank you guys so much. And email me, WhatsApp me if you have any questions. Doreen, do you have any questions before I actually finish this lesson?
No, no, I don't have any questions.
Okay, so let me then stop recording.